Paige Bueckers and the UConn Huskies are not done. They got 2 more games left. We're headed to Tampa. Welcome to the Hoops Cat Pod, and thank you for making it part of your daily routine. Your home for UConn men's and women's basketball. We're available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Big East Energy Podcast Network, where passion meets precision. Before we dive into today's show, I want to take a moment to say how thankful we are for all of you. We appreciate all of your support, and it's literally just getting started. We're not even a week in. You can download it on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering UConn men's and women's basketball, the hoops capital of the world, and we're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. Okay. Paige Bueckers and the UConn women are in the Final Four, beating shortchanged USC team, meaning losing JuJu Watkins. But look, I spent most of the night watching this game and, putting together a bunch of different things for the Hoops Cat Pod on social media and all of the things for behind the scenes on the Big East Energy Network. So I was multitasking because I felt super confident in this team. They covered by a half a point last night. So that was a nice Sarah Strong 2 free throws at the end. But the truth is, they got up to about 9. The league got to 19, and UConn they're kind of, how would we describe them? They're not necessarily a tornado where they kind of get out there and blow you away right away. It's kind of a boa constrictor where they just kind of tighten their grip until you lose your energy and you just give up. And similar to like the way a boxer just peppers you with jabs over and over again until you finally say no mas, right? Paige was clapping with 2 seconds left in this game, finally allowing herself to celebrate. She had 31 points, 6 assists, 9 of 11 shooting. In her place in March Madness history with 4 25-point Elite 8 games. I mean, I know she doesn't have a title to her resume, but a lot of it is timing. A lot of it is bad luck. This is her time. This is her year. She has literally led the way in this NIL social media era of players getting paid, and also the idea that she has had to deal with the types of requests that she has to deal with on a regular basis. And Geno talked about that in his press conference. I wish I had the audio. Maybe we'll put that on social media. I'm sorry if the light is distracting. I have to figure out something to cover up that skylight once I get this thing going a little bit more. But she's super rare in the respect that she has had multiple championships that people have expected of her. Very similar to what Geno said about, she scores 30 in the first in her first game, 40 in the next game, and then people expected maybe 50 tonight, but she only got 31. But she was super efficient. She is leading with not only by example, but with trying to get this team all together. How many times have you seen a superstar that has this level of pressure, expectation, and still over-deliver, not just deliver, but over-deliver on the game's biggest stage, which was this game. This was a standalone Elite 8 game against USC, which was bidded against, was supposed to be JuJu versus Paige, UConn versus USC. And unfortunately, you didn't get to see JuJu. We wish her the best. But I can't tell you how many times I've watched a game where LeBron James, who has all the pressure in the world and has had that pressure since he was in high school, just didn't deliver on a big stage. And has he delivered in the past? Absolutely. So this isn't about him, but I'm just saying Paige hasn't delivered in the past because of injuries or injuries to other players on her team. It hasn't been about her play. You can't point to a game where she went like 1 of 12 or just didn't show up. Geno called her one of the most unique people I've ever coached. Yeah, and I thought it was really great listening to his press conference where he talked about um, how he always say she always goes to the positive. Like he said, I'll look at the stat sheet when we're up here at a press conference, and I'll say, what's up with that? 4 turnovers, and then she looks at it and goes, yeah, but you see how I made that up with 4 steals? So they kind of cancel each other out. It's an interesting way of looking at it, right? Coaches are always looking to get you to not feel comfortable with what you did and look for the next thing. And she counterbalances Geno's like rough exterior really well. And Paige is the ultimate competitor. She is at the Final Four hysterically as a 2 seed. And I think that's a storyline in itself. Unfortunately for USC, they ran into a buzzsaw that is this 2 seed of UConn. And it's going to be ideal for Paige to be in Tampa for her last chapter and possibly her most iconic, because they are a heavy favorite to win. They're a 7 or 8 point favorite against UCLA, who spent most of the year at number 1. And if they're to win that game, I guarantee they'll be favored in the final. So and that hasn't been the case lately. So when we return, we're going to talk about that bounce back that I talked about with Sarah Strong, because she was fantastic. And Azzi Fudd lit a fire late, kind of helped them as they were backsliding just a little bit after this. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn here at the Hoopscat Pod. 11-time national champion UConn Women's Huskies. Like and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already at the Big East Energy channel and network. All right, Paige is always the headliner, but I'll tell you what, man, Sarah Strong has stole the spotlight many a times for her. She had 22 points, 17 rebounds, and 10 first quarter points. Only the second freshman to ever post a 20-15-plus game in the Elite Eight. Her performance is just kind of giving a preview to Husky fans of what the future is going to be like when Paige goes to the pros, because we're in good hands. We did a podcast with Bella Tamano about, who's coming in and the freshmen that are also going to take over, that are coming in next year, and potentially some transfer portal folks. But man, having Sarah Strong just means that you're always going to be in the national title conversation. And then bringing Azzi Fudd back. We're going to talk about her in a second. But Sarah is going to be the focal point next year, and she might as well be the focal point this year, because who do you guard? Like who do you focus on? We talked about this on the pregame show yesterday. It's like, if you're USC and you're going into this game, how could you have prepared for this? They weren't going to play drop coverage because that's how Paige gave them a 40-piece with Oklahoma, but when you don't play drop coverage, there's Sarah to deal with, and she dealt with it. And she's playing against seniors. Like Kiki Auriemma at the beginning of the game looked like she wasn't going to miss, and then we'll get into how she had a disappointing night as well. Yeah, and Azzi Fudd, talking about disappointing nights, she started off 0 for 9, and then the fourth quarter happened, and she had clutch threes. She had great composure. The fourth quarter was essentially hers. It shows you the value of experience in March. Caitlin Chen had a couple of great and ones. Ashlyn Shade was all over the place. KK Arnold was her usual self. I thought Jana played well. I thought, a couple times she gave up a couple of things here and there, but then, we need to shore that up, and hopefully it'll come to fruition, because Lauren Betts is a monster. But one of the things I was talking to my parents about this, big UConn fans, and before the game, I said, once we get past this game, because I was very confident, play UCLA. And they have Lauren Betts, and she's 6'7", and she's the focal point of their offense. The type of pressure that UConn puts on the ball, and they displayed it against USC, because that's who they were going to have to play through. They're going to have to play through Kiki. They're going to have to play through Raya Marshall, like that. Not necessarily someone like JuJu, who plays more like Paige. So unfortunately for USC and others who face UConn, when you don't have the type of talent that UConn has in the backcourt in terms of like playmakers, and you're relying on post presence, when the guards for UConn, like Ashlyn, like KK, like Paige, like Azzi, who don't get enough credit for their defense, pressure the ball and get deflections, then all these passes to to down low post presence, the front court, it's almost like it doesn't cancel itself out, like because because Kiki Arifan had a nice game initially, and she started to struggle. You just the lanes aren't as crisp. The spacing isn't as much as isn't there, and I think they're going to put a ton of pressure on UCLA to try to make shots versus just going to Lauren Betts. And then rebounding is going to be a huge factor. But then we talked about how the game against Oklahoma, how they out rebounded their opponents in the first two games by an NCAA margin plus 68, and so NCAA record, and then they out rebounded Oklahoma. So anything that needs to be done with this team, they have options, and I think that's going to continue against UCLA. I don't necessarily know if they're going to cover a 7.5 or 8 point spread, but I'll tell you what, if you're rolling with them and you've been winning this whole way, I don't see why you wouldn't at least throw some money on the Final Four, right? So Geno's going to go for number 12. It's ridiculous. Just 16 of the last 17 Final Fours. His 24th and UConn's 24th Final Four appearance. Like, just let that sink in. I know that women's basketball initially, when they were making their initial run, wasn't a treasure chest of, tons of talent at every spot the way we have it now. But if you noticed, the ones and twos are still in the Elite Eight. And now all the ones and essentially the fifth number one, UConn, are in the Final Four, very similar to the men. But the men a lot of times have 5s and 8s and 7s go to the Final Four, and you just don't see that on the women's side. And we're not there yet, but who cares? Doing something this well consistently for years, don't care if there's 10 teams that are legit. If you're always the best, if you're always there at the end, whether you win it or lose it, that's to be celebrated and not to be poo-pooed as like, well, there's not as much parity. Someone's got to win, and it might as well be UConn because it's their world. And we're going to talk about that coming up after the break. All right. Let's have some perspective here. There's Disneyland and there's Disney World, and then there's UConn's world. That was Geno's quote. He's funny. Look, 24th Final Four, 16th in the last 17 years. The pursuit of a national championship, number 12. This year's initial adversity with some injuries, the rotations, kind of the evolution of this team, mirrors past championship teams. And it also talks about the evolution of Geno as a coach and how at the beginning of the year I was having people at that other channel that I used to have, my YouTube mentions talking about how, man, they can't get it done, and Geno's got his head up his ass, and like he needs to do this, he needs to do that, he needs to run a modern offense. This has been happening for years, and all I kept saying was like the guy is the all-time winningest coach in basketball history, and now he's got a team that when it's fully healthy is going to contend for a national championship, and you're talking to me about the offense as if you know better. I certainly don't know better. I'm smart enough to realize that the people that are in this sport know what they're doing. And I may know basketball. You may think I'm a very trusted advisor. You may think I'm a very good analyst or a very bad analyst. I don't care. It's not the point. What I do know for a fact is that Geno Auriemma is the winningest coach in basketball history, not just women's basketball history, basketball history in college. And to watch him do interviews with Scott Van Pelt with his hat on backwards and being jovial and laughing about UConn being an underdog, like he's come full circle of being that fiery, Italian immigrant that it was us against the world and fuck everybody that's in our way. And, I'm going to kill or be killed, to having this perspective of that only someone that's been doing this for 40 years could probably have. And it's just the culture that he's created. Final Four or bust, championship or bust. He's a prisoner of his own success. And he's even tried to kind of bestow a little bit of his wisdom to our counterpart on the men's side and Dan Hurley so that Dan doesn't go crazy out there. Because Geno gets upset, but he also like tells his team and his players when they did something wrong. Like great example of something that would have never happened with Dan Hurley, but happened with Geno. Geno basically told Ashlyn Shade that she created an offensive foul, and I'm not saying Dan doesn't agree with the refs all the time, but I don't think he would ever like overtly tell his player like, "Hey, you did this, and just get back on defense and shut up. They're right." Like he may just like look at you like, why'd you do that? But that just to me that shows just like such a maturity that you're not going to blame everything on the officials. I still need to learn about that, and hopefully as I get older, I will. But one of the things that I loved about Geno watching that game is when they kind of sealed it. There was a moment where on the television he kind of exhaled a little bit, and it wasn't probably an exhale, but it was just like one of those acknowledgments that, yeah, we did it this year. For all of the can't win the big game earlier in the year, Notre Dame, and then they lost Tennessee on the road, and they lost to USC at home. Coach Gottlieb shared a really special moment through some tears in the press conference, and I feel bad for her because, she's a good young coach, and she really showed a lot of class in the press conference praising UConn. I guess over Christmas break, maybe on Christmas or Christmas Eve, Geno texted her and said, "Hey, just great game for you guys and a great win for your program. Just want to let you know you guys are doing it the right way, et cetera, and that kind of thing." And she said, I think he said something like, "We'll see you in Tampa this year." And unfortunately, obviously, they're in the same. She said, made a joke and said, he didn't say, "I'll see you in Spokane" or Spokane initially, ironically, because I don't think they realized that they would both be in the same side of the bracket again. And so, I just think it shows that Geno is a lot more sympathetic to the difficulties of a young coach when there's a lot of pressure, because USC is a pressure job right now. They have the best player in the country, not named Paige Bueckers. She was probably going to be National Player of the Year this year, and if she had a nice NCAA tournament, maybe that's solidified. I think you can argue that JuJu was the best player in college basketball this year for the full regular season, and so it just sucks that she wasn't able to play. And so I loved that acknowledgement from Coach Gottlieb, and wish them the best, and hopefully we'll have many more battles with them through the years. And I think the emotional core of this team is obviously Paige, but I think some of that is shared with Azzi, because as this dynasty rolls on, I don't think there's ever been a shared, and I'm sure people will hit me up and say, "Well, you don't really know all the history of multiple different players that have been injured." And I'm talking about and this is no disrespect to any role players, because everyone plays a role on a team, and Paige is a superstar. Azzi's also kind of like the Robin to her Batman, so like she's also a superstar in that respect. Sarah is also a budding superstar, a freshman. So what I mean by that is like all of the pressure is on those two to win a title, and they've also had the most injuries, devastating injuries, because they haven't been able to fulfill that promise. And so, all the things in Paige's life, the NIL deals and the shoe deals and the social media and all the things that she goes through, and having a stalker and like all this crazy stuff that's happened to her in her time at UConn. And I think the only person that really can, reconcile with that, or at least recognize what that's like, is Azzi, because Azzi's been through it all, man. And she's got this, I saw a tweet from Steph Curry saying that he was proud of her. Like, they're superstars. Like, for better or for worse, the game has changed. They're semi-professional athletes playing in the college game until they get to the pros. And hopefully the type of recognition that they're getting in college continues as the W gets even more recognition and better players in the league. So great game. if you're going to Tampa, I wish I was going to be there, but one of the unfortunate events that happened with my departure from Locked On is so went my credential. So I am not going to be there this coming weekend. Sending all the good vibes your way for a 12th national championship. And if you're coming from a cold weather or kind of miserable weather situation in New England or other places in the world, enjoy the Tampa, Florida air. Get some much needed R&R and get ready to scream your head off for the UConn women to continue this run. All right, this has been another episode of Locked On. See, I'm still not out of that mold. This has been another episode of the Hoopscat Pod. For Mark Zanetto here at Big East Energy Network, I will tell you, as Geno says, it's not about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. Promise this light won't be an issue going forward. So we're going to take care of it all for you, and go Huskies on the way to number 12.